Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have an absolutely chilling collection of paranormal and ghost stories for you to enjoy, and I would like to wish Sonia and Dave a very happy 22-year wedding anniversary for tomorrow. Please feel free to congratulate them in the comments as well. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. A friend of mine has a 3-year-old son. She's a nurse, and this happened while she was helping out a neighbor who was dying from cancer. She wasn't involved as a nurse, just as a neighbor checking in, bringing groceries, that sort of thing. The woman had already declined to the point where she was in a coma and expected to pass at any time. Well, one morning around 9, my friend called the woman's husband to see if he needed anything from the store before she came by. He asked for a few basic things, so she grabbed her son and headed out. They took about an hour between the driving and the shopping, and on her way over she started thinking about whether it would be a good idea to bring her son into the house. He was young, and she knew the situation inside wasn't something most people would want a child to see. She tried to explain it to him in simple terms while they were in the car. She told him the woman wasn't just sleeping, she was in a coma and probably would not wake up. Before she could finish, he interrupted her mama and said, "Mama, she's already dead." She told him no, not yet, but it would probably happen soon. He repeated himself more firmly this time, "Mama, she is dead." He was neither upset or scared. He was certain. They pulled up to the house around 10 and walked up to the front door. When they rang the bell, the hospice nurse answered, and before my friend could even say why she was there, the nurse told her the woman had passed away about a half hour earlier, around 9:30. My friend didn't say much after that. She just went back to the car with her son trying to process the timing, and once they were inside, she asked him how he knew the woman had died. He said, "Tony told me." She asked him who Tony was, because she didn't know anyone by that name connected to the family. Her son told her that Tony was a little boy, about a year old, and that he was in the same house as the woman. There hadn't been any children in that house, not visitors or family, no one. The only child there that morning was her son. I don't know how he got that information, but it always creeps me out whenever I think about it. So to start the story off, this experience happened in late May of 2023, when I was 16 years old. All I remember is waking up at around 2:30 a.m. and looking into my hallway from my room. Anyway, I remember looking down the hallway from my bed and seeing a man who resembled my father. I wasn't freaked out by it at all because my dad normally is up and about throughout the night, but I decided to say hello to the figure. The moment I said hello, the figure faded away. I didn't really think much of it because I didn't really care and wanted to go back to sleep. But I know for a fact before I went to sleep, I put Vaseline on my lips and then lay back down. Fast forward about 5 hours. I wake up to my mum on the phone in the living room and then running around to the bedroom. I get up and follow her in because who calls this early? My mum hands the phone over to my dad and we are told that my grandpa, my dad's dad, has passed away. Obviously I'm heartbroken and stressed because he died in my home state, Ohio, and I live over 32 hours away. So we ended up driving to Ohio, and there I find out what happened to him. From the coroner's point of view, he got up in the middle of the night, around 4:30, and went to the downstairs bathroom and threw up, stood up, and had a widowmaker's heart attack. I live in Mountain Time, and he lived in the Eastern Time Zone, so the times match up on when I woke up and when he died. While I was in Ohio, I found a picture album of him and my grandma, and I came to the realization that the guy who was in the hallway was most definitely my grandpa, but younger. I don't know if I'm crazy or if this is a commonplace phenomena. Please, help me figure this out. My entire life, I just seem to have been haunted. I don't know how else to put it. There is a figure/entity that has followed me my entire life, and I have had multiple people describe it to me in great detail, even if I've never been able to describe them. I can't say it's malicious towards me, but it has always been malicious towards others. It has got to the point where my partner is being terrorized and they live over half-hour away from me, and I am extremely worried for them. So from birth to my early childhood, my mother would describe a tall, shadowy man with red eyes that always appeared in places around the house. It didn't matter if we moved, it would always pop up, be it in the corners, in the mirror. There would be several issues that went on within the multiple homes we lived in. Cabinets all open, things flying off the counters or tables, possessions going missing and reappearing in thin air. Electronics, mostly microwaves, would just stop working even if it was brand new. Both my parents would describe being terrorized by this man when they slept. Scratches, being pulled out of bed, nightmares. My brother has even described this tall man the same way my parents did when asked about it. From early childhood to teens, it just continues to get more active. If I stayed at the house of another family member or friend, they'd tell me days later about being terrorized by the tall man, in the same way that my parents and family are. They describe things going missing, seeing shadowy figures and hearing voices. I'd like to add that several of my family members are extremely religious, and were even describing these things to me even after they'd had their house cleansed. It's as if this tall man has no boundaries. Some of my earlier relationships were terrorized so terribly that they just stopped being friends with me over it. Or they'd refuse to talk to me about it altogether. That's how scared they were. I also noticed that anyone who encountered it would slowly become more and more aggressive towards me. Not sure if that has anything to do with it. From teens to adulthood to now, it just continues. I always see it out of the corner of my eye. I can always feel it. It never bothers me in the way that it bothers others. It's just there, watching all the time. I almost feel schizophrenic over it. But I can't, because everyone around me has described exactly what the tall man looks like and how it terrorizes them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it is seriously bothering my partner. We don't live together. I visit occasionally to hang out. They're telling me that every night they're being terrorized by this thing. Scratches, bruises, crosses falling off the walls, aggressive whispering, banging on the walls and pictures falling from the walls, and nightmares. Their house has continually been blessed, and I have continually been cleansed by their priest. It's getting to the point where I feel that my partner is resenting me for it and not wanting to be around me for much. I'd like to know what this is and why it has followed me for so long. I know it sounds ridiculous, but truthfully, I just want direction on how to make it stop. I feel awful that so many around me keep experiencing fear in this way. When I was around 12, we used to stay at my stepmom's grandmother's house for short holidays on the Isle of Wight. It was an older house, not that big, and had a slightly cramped layout, where every room felt like it had been added on at different periods of time, and nothing really fit well together. My stepsister and I always shared the small box room. It barely fit the bed, and we had to sleep top to tail in order to make it work. Well, one night, we were doing what kids usually do our age, chat and gossip about random stuff until we eventually drifted off. We fell asleep like we always did, and the next morning I woke up feeling completely normal. But my stepsister, on the other hand, did not look like she'd had a refreshing sleep. It looked like she'd barely slept, and when I asked her about it, she told me she woke up at 3 a.m. and saw me sitting at the end of the bed, just sitting there facing the wall. She said she knew it was me immediately, as it had the same long dark hair and same pajamas that I had gone to sleep in. There was nothing about it that looked wrong at a first glance, though. It was just me, sitting there in silence. So she called my name, and I didn't reply. She called it again, louder this time, but I didn't react. I just kept sitting there, completely ignoring her. So this time, she thought maybe I was messing with her or sleepwalking or something, so she thought it would be a good idea to nudge me. And when she got up in order to do so, she saw that I was still lying right next to her fast asleep. She said it didn't make any sense at all. She could see both of me at the same time, one in the bed asleep, and something that looked exactly like me sitting at the end of it. She said the thing on the bed never moved, not even slightly. It didn't turn around or move or anything. That's when she pulled the covers over herself and stayed there, not moving and not making a sound, and she stayed awake, petrified in fear until morning. I didn't really know what to say when she said all of this. I had no memory of waking up, moving, or anything. As far as I knew, I'd slept through the night without interruption. Whatever she saw that night wasn't me, and as the years passed, the story never changed. I worked at a historic courthouse and had many weird experiences. It was at the Atlantic County Courthouse in Mays Landing, New Jersey. I have mentioned a few of my experiences before, but one of the ones I rarely mentioned happened when I was coming to work one morning. Attached to the side of the courthouse there was an old sheriff's mansion. That is where the sheriff and his family used to live back in the early decades of the 1900s. In the 80s the house was used as offices, but in the years since the house has been vacated and sealed off behind a locked door. Only the guard has access to it while he does his rounds. One morning, I parked behind the courthouse and headed to the rear entrance. As soon as I walked up, I glanced up at the third-floor attic window of the old mansion and nearly dropped my coffee, because there up in the window was a brown human-shaped figure staring down at me. My blood froze as I could make out a head and shoulders of a child-sized person looking back at me. As I watched, the figure glided back and out of view into the attic. I immediately ran into the courthouse to the door that connected it to the sheriff's house. The door was locked. I knocked on it and put my ear to it. The entire house is very creaky, and I would certainly hear if someone was walking around or coming down the stairs, but there was nothing. I ran to find the guard, and he was deep in the midst of conversation with another employee on the second floor of the courthouse. I told him what I saw, and urged him to unlock the door and come with me to check the mansion. Being used to the ghostly activity, he refused because he was in the middle of assisting the employee, but assured me no one was in the mansion as he would have had to have let them in. One of the ghosts who allegedly haunts the courthouse is that of a little girl who is heard running through the hallways and calling out for her mother in the basement. It is believed that she is the spirit of the sheriff's daughter, and whose room was up in the attic. During an authorized ghost investigation we did up in the attic, I did an EVP session and I asked, "Is anyone here with us?" And on a recording, I caught a little girl's voice responding, "Me." I loved working at that place. For anyone who is interested in reading more about the Atlantic County Courthouse, I compiled my experiences and those of several employees including the guard, and self-published a book called The Zayas Zone, which you can find on Amazon. I'm a medical examiner and have had many paranormal experiences, so I'm not usually taken aback when things happen. I just respect that we are in their space, especially with how invasive we have to be. I let them get out their frustrations and I respect them in that way. Fast forward to 5 years into working for the office. I just graduated and finished residency. I got a job immediately in my local coroner's office. I have had countless experiences, and I'm not shocked by anything anymore. I am performing an autopsy, and I've just finished up. I do my prayers, I do it out of respect, especially if I know their beliefs, and I walk into my office, shut the door, and sat down at my desk. I look up, and there was a teen girl. She just looked at me. She was no patient of mine, nor had she been in the past. I had absolutely no idea who she was. Weeks pass and I can't get her face out of my head. I can't place where I would know her from. Nothing, I have absolutely no idea. Well, after about 3 days, I gave up, and she showed up again. She walked up to me, hugged me, and breathed, "I'm so sorry," and then evaporated like mist. She went through me and disappeared rather than really hugged me. That shook me to my core. About a month later, I came across an old photo. A girl with my other sister. I took it to my mother. She sat me down and told me something disturbing. Before I was born, my oldest sister passed away due to a drunk driving accident. They were going the wrong way and hit her. After I was born, my sperm donor admitted that the reason he wanted me was to replace the daughter he lost. I have never met my sperm donor. My sister has rejected him completely. He considered 2 non-biological girls his daughters and doesn't care about us. That girl was my sister, I believe. She was younger in the photo, but looked super close. I don't know if I had just seen the photo and had a hallucination, or if my sister is still roaming this plane. Is it bad that I hope that I was hallucinating instead of her being trapped on this earth as a spirit? I feel bad, but I also just want her to be at peace, or I want to be able to talk to her. Maybe put some closure I need after finding all of that out. If she has now left this earth, I'd be grateful, even if I don't know everything. I worked in a few places people swore were haunted, but the one that always stuck with me was a restaurant in Harwich Port on Cape Cod. I was about 19 at the time, and even before I started there, everyone already had stories about the place. It wasn't even presented like a rumor, it was more like, you'll eventually see what we mean. Well, one night, one of the servers went into the walk-in refrigerator to prep salads before the dinner rush. This was nothing unusual, it was just part of closing side work. A few minutes later, we heard a loud crash from inside. When we ran in, she was on the floor, clearly shaken, holding the back of her head. She kept saying someone had yanked her apron strings hard enough to pull her backwards. The thing is, she had been completely alone in there. No one else had gone in, and there was nowhere to hide. The walk-in was small, bright, and empty except for the shelves. Another time I was working the hostess stand on a slow night. Barely any customers, with the kitchen mostly quiet. I had 2 packs of cigarettes sitting right on the counter next to me, and at some point I noticed they were gone. They were neither misplaced or knocked over, but 100% gone. So I checked under the stand, behind it, in the drawers, and even went into the kitchen asking if anyone had grabbed them as a joke. I started to get annoyed. I began accusing people of messing with me because there was no way they just vanished. I stepped away for maybe a minute, and when I came back, both packs were sitting there again, not just tossed down either, they were neatly stacked up right against the wall, like someone had just placed them on there. No one admitted to touching them, and there weren't really any opportunities for anyone to sneak over and do that without me seeing them do it. The upstairs was another thing entirely. It wasn't used much, mostly storage, and at night it was supposed to be completely empty. But you'd hear footsteps up there all the time, pacing back and forth, and it got to the point where we'd all just look at each other when it started and say, "You hear that too, right?" Nobody ever volunteered to go check it out. It wasn't constant chaos or anything like that, but just enough happening to sort of get to you after a while. So I was at the mall with my mum and sister. We had stopped inside a Macy's, and Mum decided to stay behind to look at makeup. My sister and I got bored and said that we were going to walk over to Claire's while she finished up. Now, there's nothing strange about any of this, and as we're walking through the mall, we passed one of those lounge areas with couches and small tables where people sit and rest. Right as we were passing it, I got this really strong feeling that someone was watching me, not just a glance, but really focused in on me. You know the feeling. So I turned my head to look, and there was a girl sitting on one of the couches, or at least that's what I thought at first. She looked like she was with a group, because there was a woman sitting there, and the girl had her arm resting on her like she belonged there. But the second I actually focused on her, I noticed that she was pale, unnaturally so. Her face didn't have much expression except for this tight closed mouth grin, and she was wearing a white dress with her hair hanging limply down on both sides of her face and partially covering it. The way she framed her face reminded me like something straight out of a horror movie. And what really got to me were the fact that her eyes didn't blink, but stared at me transfixed. I kept walking for a second but couldn't shake it, so I stopped and turned to my sister and asked her if she saw that girl stare at me. She looked confused in the direction I had been looking at and said, "What girl?" Of course, when I pointed to the couch, the girl was gone. Bear in mind, the amount of time between me witnessing it, expressing it to my sister, and her looking could be no more than about 4 seconds, and they had completely vanished. There was nowhere for this girl to have gone to that quickly without us seeing or hearing. I looked around the entire area, scanning every direction, but there was no sign of her. We were only a few steps away. This wasn't enough time for someone to just disappear like that in a crowded mall. I didn't say much after that, I just kept walking, but the odd feeling stuck with me. I have 2 experiences from my childhood that I still can't fully explain, and both happened when I was alone, and that is probably what makes me feel worst about them. The first one happened when I was being an incredibly annoying kid. I was doing that thing where you just keep calling your mum over and over. I know most of you have probably heard the Stewie meme non-stop. I mean, it's on TikTok and Instagram, isn't it? But I was doing the whole thing, mum, 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 non-stop, not even giving her a moment to answer. And I remember it clearly because I was just trying to get a reaction at that point. After a while, I suddenly heard my dad yell from the basement, loud and sharp, telling me to be quiet. That startled me, and I stopped. A few hours later, my mum was in the kitchen making dinner, and I asked her when Dad was going to join us. She looked confused and told me that he wasn't home, that he was at work and had been gone all day. And I began arguing with her because I was so sure I heard him. Years later, after we'd already moved out, I brought it up again. She said she remembered that day, remembered me being loud and annoying, but she never heard anything from the basement. And the strangest part is that we had been in basically the same part of the house. If someone had actually yelled that loud, she ought to have heard it too. The second one that happened was a few years after. My dad was working again, and it was just me and my mum at home. We were in her bedroom watching movies and relaxing, when out of nowhere one of our Halloween props started going off from the storage area. It was loud enough that it immediately freaked me out, and I remember just freezing and starting to cry because it was so sudden and out of place. My mum got up to turn it off, trying to calm me down at the same time. She didn't tell me this until much later, but when she checked it, the prop didn't even have batteries in it. It was one of those motion-activated decorations that shouldn't have been able to do anything without power at all. But it had gone off anyway, loud enough for both of us to hear it clearly from another room. We still have that prop and it has been used with batteries in it, and it has never done anything like that since. This happened during a primary school trip in the mountains of France when I was around 10 years old. We stayed in a large old lodge that had 2 floors. The dining hall was on the ground level and several shared bedrooms were upstairs. My room was on the 2nd floor with 4 other girls. Our beds were arranged on the far side, and I slept closest to a small window set into the wall beside me. The place itself wasn't frightening at first, but after a few days, rumors started spreading amongst the students. It was around the time that the Momo image was circulating online, and kids began telling each other that it could haunt you. That quickly blended with other stories, especially about one called La Dame Blanche, the White Lady. Some students claimed they had tried summoning games like Bloody Mary and got scared, even if they had laughed it off afterwards. During the day we would joke about it, even chant her name while walking to activities, but at night, of course, everything changed. The same jokes no longer felt as innocuous as they did in the daylight. Well, one night, while everyone else in my room was asleep, I woke up suddenly. I can't remember why I woke up or what woke me specifically, but everything in the atmosphere felt uncomfortable. The usual sounds from outside, be it either cows moving their bells or insects, seemed to have been put on mute, and the silence was feeling unnatural. That was when I noticed something near the window. At first it looked like a faint shape forming out of the moonlight, and then it became clearer. There was a woman standing there, dressed in white. She appeared partially transparent, but defined enough that I could make out her outline and movements. It looked as if she had emerged directly from the light coming through the window. She moved slowly, her head turning between me and the other girls sleeping across the room. I did not move. I was too afraid to even shift under the covers. I felt like if I looked away, she may get closer. My body was completely tense, and I could feel myself starting to cry, but I stayed silent. Her face was the worst part. It did not stay the same. Sometimes it looked almost blank, too pale to distinguish features. Other times her eyes and mouth darkened, becoming sharper and more defined, almost unnaturally so. The changes were subtle but constant, like her face could not settle in one form. I couldn't tell what she wanted. She did not rush at me or make any sudden movements, but her presence alone was disturbing, and I had the overwhelming sense that I should not be able to see her, and that I wasn't supposed to be awake. At some point, without planning to, I began to pray. I was not religious, but it was the only thing I could think to do. I kept repeating that I wanted to go home, that I had been good, and I did not want anything to happen to me or the others in the room. She never reacted to anything I did. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion. I remember her still being there the last moment I was awake. When I woke up in the morning, everything was normal again. The sunlight filled the room. The other girls were waking up, and the outside sounds had returned. There was no sign that anything had happened. I did try and talk about it later. A few other kids claimed they had seen something similar during the trip, but no one went into detail. The adults suggested it might have been my imagination or someone checking on us during the night, but they never resembled anyone I knew. Nothing like that ever happened again, but I never forgot that night. This happened just a few hours ago, and I still haven't been able to shake it. I had been working from home all morning. My son left for the babysitter around 9 a.m., and I stayed at my desk working straight until about 1:30. After that, I went downstairs, made myself some lunch, checked a few emails, and then decided to go fold some laundry. I brought the basket into the bedroom and started folding the towels on the bed. I had a podcast playing, Mort's bedtime stories while I worked. My back was to the bedroom door the whole time, and I was completely relaxed just going through the routine. At some point, I saw my husband come into the room. It wasn't out of the corner of my eye or anything vague, I saw him clearly. He walked in through the doorway, past the foot of the bed like he always does, and went straight into the bathroom. It was such a normal, everyday thing that I didn't question it at all. He does it all the time. My brain didn't even pause on it once. I remember thinking I'd ask him to put the basket of towel away once he was back out. Right around then, my phone rang. It was a friend, so I picked up and began talking as I kept folding. A few minutes passed, and somewhere in the middle of the conversation it hit me that my husband had been an awfully long time in the bathroom, on his phone, no doubt. I still had things to put away in there, so once I got a pause in the call, I walked into the bathroom. And nobody was in there. I checked anyway, like maybe I was missing something, but it was completely empty. There was no sound or movement and anything out of place, and I stepped back into the bathroom, half expecting him to be there, but still nothing. At that point I went downstairs, and there he was, on the treadmill. He had been there the entire time. He hadn't come upstairs at all, not once since I started folding laundry. I asked him just to be sure, and he confirmed it. He had not left the treadmill. And then I noticed something. When I saw him in the bedroom, he was wearing a blue tank top and grey pants. I remember that clearly. But the person downstairs, my actual husband, was wearing a black t-shirt and plaid pants. Completely different clothes. That's when it really hit me that something wasn't right. The only other detail that stuck with me were the dogs. They had been laying in the bedroom while I was folding, and when he walked in, both of them lifted their heads at the same time, like they noticed someone entering the room, but they didn't bark or react beyond that. After that, they just settled back down like everything was ordinary. I didn't feel scared in that moment at all, until I realized that something was really wrong. I was about 11 years old. My sister and I shared a bedroom. Our beds were positioned across from each other, with just enough space between them to walk through. One night she was staying over at a friend's house, so I was alone in the room. I woke up suddenly, sometime around 2 a.m. I don't remember what woke me, but I was fully alert almost immediately. The room was completely dark, and it took a few moments for my eyes to grow accustomed to the darkness. As my vision settled, I looked over towards my sister's bed, and there was something laying on it. At first, I assumed my eyes must be playing tricks on me, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. It was shaped like a person, stretched out flat on its back exactly where my sister would normally be sleeping, but it didn't look right. I couldn't make out any facial features or details, just a solid outline. The thing that really stood out was a faint glow, a dull green color that outlined the entire figure against the darkness. It wasn't bright, but just enough to make it visible. I remember freezing for a second, trying to process what I was looking at. My mind kept trying to turn it into something normal, but it didn't move, didn't breathe, or didn't react like a real person would, but stayed perfectly still. And that was the moment the fear took over, and I shouted for my dad. My voice must have had some panic in it, because I immediately heard him jump out of bed down the hall. He started calling out, asking what was wrong, and I could hear him moving quickly towards my room. The hallway was dark, and the light switch for it was right by my bedroom door, so he was basically running blind towards me. The entire time he was coming down the hall, the figure didn't move. It stayed exactly where it was, still glowing faintly on my sister's bed, unperturbed by the fact that someone was about to walk in. I kept my eyes locked on it, not daring to look away even as my dad got closer. I could hear his footsteps and the shuffle as he reached the wall, feeling for the light switch. And the moment he turned it on, the room lit up, and of course the bed was empty. There was nothing there, just my sister's bed, exactly as it should have been. My dad came into the room right after asking what happened, but I didn't even know how to explain it properly. I just kept looking at the bed, trying to understand how something that clear could vanish the moment the light came on. I was fully awake the entire time. I heard him coming. I watched the figure while he ran down the hall, and it vanished the moment the light turned on in the room. I still have no explanation for what happened that night, and thankfully, I had no repeat visit from whatever this phantom was. I was home alone. Half my family is out of town, and the only other person who lives with me was at work and wouldn't be back until after midnight. So it's safe to say the house was completely empty except for me. I was in the shower just listening to music on my phone as normal. I keep my phone on the back of the toilet so I can hear the music clearly. And then the song ended. You know that there's a short pause between track where everything just goes quiet? Well, right in that gap, I heard a knock on the bathroom door. It wasn't particularly loud, and so I froze and listened. For a moment I thought someone maybe had come home early, even though that didn't really make sense. I didn't hear the front door or didn't hear any footsteps or anything else. But I did then hear a voice. It sounded like my mum. Clear enough that I immediately recognized it, but at the same time I couldn't make out every word because the next song had started and the shower was still running. It sounded like she was asking about a brush or makeup or something like that, like she was checking if it was in the bathroom. The problem was, she wasn't home. There was no way she could have been. I didn't answer right away. I stood there trying to listen and trying to figure out if I was mishearing something, and at some point I went, "Huh?" But it was more to myself than anything else. After that, there was nothing. There were no footsteps, no further replies, and I stayed in the bathroom longer than usual because I didn't really want to open the door and find out if she was out there. When I did, nothing looked amiss, but then I noticed a few things. My phone had been moved. I always leave it in the same spot on the toilet tank, but now it was changed slightly and tilted at an angle, like it had been picked up or nudged and set back down differently. I know it wasn't the way I left it. The battery had also dropped way more than it should have. It went from around 45% down to 26% in the brief time I was in the shower, which is not normal for a 15 to 20 minute stretch of playing music. And then I saw the drawer. Earlier in the day I had closed it completely. Now it was slightly open, just enough that the edge of my hairbrush was sticking out. None of it was dramatic on its own, but combined with the knock, the voice, and the fact that I was supposed to be alone in the house, none of it made sense. At least nothing else was out of place. But something definitely wasn't right. I just wish I knew what. When I was about 12 years old, I suffered an experience that I still to this day cannot explain. It was late at night, sometime after midnight. I couldn't sleep, so I was just laying in bed staring around my room in the dark. Everything was quiet, there was nothing unusual, and my room was laid out so that I could see my desk clearly from my bed. It was an old desk, an antique, that had been in the family for a long time. At some point I pulled over towards it, and somebody was sitting there. It took a second for my brain to register what I was seeing, but once it did I knew exactly who it was. It was my great-grandmother. She had passed away years before, but I recognized her immediately. She used to babysit me when I was younger, so her face was familiar. What stood out the most was how she looked. She didn't appear the way I remembered her as an old woman. Instead, she looked young, like she did in an old photograph my mum kept, one from the 1920s, when she was a teen. Her features were clear, but there was something slightly more faded about her, like she didn't fully belong in the room. She was sitting at the desk, on the bench that went with it, and the part that made it even stranger was because the desk and bench were originally hers. They had belonged to her long before I ever used them, but she had never lived in that house, and as far as I could remember, she had never even been there before. She was just sitting there, facing me, and then she raised her hand and waved. It wasn't fast, just a simple gesture, like she was acknowledging my existence. I didn't feel scared or anything, I was just trying to understand how she could be there and why she appeared the way she did. I blinked, and the moment I opened my eyes again, she started to fade. Not instantly, but gradually her outline broke apart, thinning out until there was nothing left, and within about 2 seconds, she was gone. I stayed in the room for a while afterwards, just staring at the desk, almost expecting something to happen, but nothing did. It wasn't a dream, but I can't rationally explain what happened. When I was a kid, about 10 years old perhaps, I remember sleeping in the living room on the sofa couch. My uncle slept on the other couch. It was just a regular sofa where he slept. It was a small apartment of 2 rooms, and I had a big family at that time. So anyway, I was lying down, and from the corner of my eye I saw something. So I immediately turned and looked, and I locked on to whatever there was there by the bathroom door. It was standing there, almost the height of the bathroom door. It was all black and dark, and I remember seeing its eyes. They were black, but you could see the shine on it or something. It was looking at me. I quickly woke up and jumped to the next sofa where my uncle slept and woke him up. I told him I saw something standing by the bathroom door. He went and looked. He turned on the lights to the bathroom, and there was nothing or no one. I explained to him what I saw, and he looked at me and told me to just go back to sleep, and that it was probably nothing. Well, a few years later, I started dating this girl. She was my first. We were each other's first, and I think I was about 15. I remember we were walking through the cemetery to get to my house. We liked walking through cemeteries a lot. She was the type of girl that dressed gothic hardcore sometimes. Lol, not me though. Anyway, back to that day. We walked through the cemetery. We went to my house and hung out with my family, and later that night we walked back. I walked her to the train station, and we went home. I went back home, we texted each other. She told me she saw something black walking next to me. It told her it would take care of me. At first I thought it was cool. You know, as young kids you don't really think much of it. I left it alone, and we never spoke about it again. I started seeing something and almost always saw it from the corner of my eye. There would be an object next to me, but from the corner of my eye it would take the shape of something else, and I would feel like something else is next to me or behind me watching me. I get chills all the time when I see something like that in the corner of my eyes. It makes me feel like I'm being watched. But anyway, I contacted my ex after years, and I'm in my 30s now. I asked her about that day when we were young, and if she really did in fact see something black walking next to me. She told me that she did in fact see it. And she told me that she never lied that day, and that it was very scary. I let it go after that. I was just hoping she would tell me she lied or something, because we were just kids back then, into dumb things and not knowing any better. But she stuck with her answer after all these years with nothing to gain from lying. I wonder to myself, now that I'm 36, if there is something that still walks with me, and if it somehow takes care of me. I think it knows I would be too afraid and too frightened to ever meet face to face with this thing. I would probably faint. I've had this presence for as long as I can remember living in my current house. My grandfather built it about 40 years ago. It's not old or anything, but it's the only place I've ever experienced anything like this. It started when I was around 4 years old. I would wake up in the middle of the night and see a figure standing at the end of my bed, and it was always in the same spot. Not every night, but often enough that it became familiar. The figure never had any real features, no face or clothes, just a tall human-shaped shadow. It never spoke or moved and would just kind of be there idle, watching. As a kid, I probably should have been terrified. But for reasons I cannot logically explain, I wasn't. Not really. It became something I expected to see. I even ended up giving it a name, Paul. I don't know exactly why I settled on that name, but whatever, it stuck. Over time it stopped feeling threatening and would start feeling comforting in its own right. Now this went on for years. Even as I got older, it didn't really change. Everything would be the same. I'd wake up, see it, and then eventually fall back asleep, and it became part of the routine of living in that room. Well, recently, I rearranged my bedroom. For the first time since I was a kid, I moved my bed to a different wall. The layout of the room changed, but my feet still pointed towards the same general corner. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was just a small change. But after that, I stopped seeing Paul completely. I'd wake up, and there'd be no more figure at the end of my bed. At first I thought nothing of it, but the longer it's been, the more it started to bother me. Not because I'm scared of it being gone, but because of how used to it I was. And at the same time, things have started to feel off. My anxiety has increased, my paranoia has been creeping up with it, and my medication has already been changed multiple times and increased. I know logically these things are probably all unrelated, but the timing makes things hard not to connect them in some way. My family has always joked that the house is haunted. Everyone has had moments they couldn't really explain away. But this was different for me, and I don't really know what to make of it now, or why its absence feels worse than the presence ever did. Perhaps someone could help me through this strange reverse haunting process. I'm in my early 20s and have lived in the same house all my life. Growing up, everyone else in the house has had experiences with something that is here. My dad seeing a figure in the bathtub passing by the bathroom. My mum feeling something shaking and rustling her bed. My aunt, while visiting, having a male figure yell at her in the middle of the night while staying in my sister's room. There is more, but these are some of the more significant examples I can give. All my life I have been wary if these are just tall tales from everyone else, or if it's just their brains playing tricks on them. I'm unsure. Within the past week, having lived in this house for 20 plus years, whatever it is has finally shown itself to me. It has grabbed and then dropped a piece of laundry out of the basket in my room, thrown my metal water bottle off the bed, shaken the mic stand attached to my desk, and last night it pushed my gaming chair from behind me while I was in it. From experience and or knowledge, is there any other hypothesis to what this kind of being could be? And why has it all of a sudden decided that I only now get to experience it, and in multiple quantities in such a short space of time? Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed tonight's collection of scary stories. If you did, you can let me know in the usual way. It also seems that YouTube Studio now lets you answer messages with like little voice notes. I might start doing it, so keep an eye out. Maybe you'll get a cool voice response from me. I wonder if many of you are actually interested in that, if you'd rather just get texts when I do reply to the comments, or if voice things can be a cool little way to mix it up. Anyway, your thoughts, as always, are appreciated. Also, people who are appreciated are the members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen. Their contributions go a hell of a long way in keeping the channel running, and you get cool bonus content as well for signing up. Oh, and if you just go over to Patreon, you get free stuff every Friday. Just for like checking it out. But anyway, guys, that is it from me. I will see you again soon. Stay awesome and good night.